During the late 19th century, industry was booming across Northeast America. There were many visionary men that led this industrial expansion after the Civil War. One of these men was George McMurtry, president of the Apollo Iron and Steel Company. He created one of the most prosperous and unique small towns in the country during this time. His plan was to build a new steel mill in a surrounding town that would keep his workers happy and more productive. He wanted to create a working man's paradise to serve the workers that would be employed at the new mill. He studied other industrial towns in Europe and America to understand why they were not as successful as they should be. His experiment was to create a town where the mill workers owned their homes and received benefits from the company. McMurtry named this town after Captain Vandergrift, a director of the steel company. There is a long history of planned industrial communities in America. The first of these small towns and cities were established in New England to support their growing textile industry. The towns were built to control the labor supply for the factories, not out of concern for the adequate housing for the workers.
As American industry grew, so did the popularity of company towns, especially to support the coal mines in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. Little thought went into planning these towns or providing decent housing for the workers.
In 1880, George Pullman, founder of Pullman Train Car Company, created the town Pullman, Illinois. He hired his personal architect to plan the community that would provide superior housing for his workers.
But the town was no different from the other industrial towns since no one could own property. Workers moved out of Pullman as soon as they could afford a home somewhere else.
By 1895, Pullman was known as another example of company exploitation of workers. This was the time when George McMurtry was performing research to design his own version of a company town for his new steel mill. He was looking for ideas to create a loyal workforce that would not go on strike and would work at the plant for many years. All of the previous experimentation by Pittsburgh-based entrepreneurs were focused on changes in technology. When they decided to create Vandergrift, they reoriented the focus of their experimentation from product to people and place. McMurtry's most unique idea was home ownership by the workers. He hired Frederick Law Olmsted, a famous landscape architect with city planning experience. McMurtry told Mr. Olmsted to build something better than the best. The town of Pullman was criticized for its dreary grid-patterned streets and its dull brick buildings, so Vandergrift was designed with Olmsted's characteristic curved streets, and individual ownership provided a variety of architecture. The company broke ground for both the new plant and the new town on May 2, 1895, and the first lots were available to workers on June 8, 1896. On the first day, 276 out of 814 available lots were sold. The first steel was produced in the mill on January 11, 1897. When the town was not growing at a fast enough rate for McMurtry, he stated, "If you don't buy our home sites, you can't work in our mill." The company offered to pay half of the cost of building churches and set aside premium corner lots for them. They also donated land for schools and donated $14,000 to help the town build a community building to contain a library, a place for council to meet, and an auditorium where people might see plays. The casino, as it was named, opened June 23, 1900. The town had its share of triumphs. In 1904, when a model of the town was displayed at the St. Louis World's Fair, its design won 2 gold medals.
Journalist and historian Ida Tarbell visited Vandergrift in 1916. She was so impressed with the town and its unique concept that she called it the most important industrial town in America.
The plant grew quickly, and by 1906, 2,200 men were employed at the mill. An April 18, 1907 Vandergrift News article claimed the sheet department at the Vandergrift mill has long been known as the largest in the world. The entire length takes a walk of over 1/4 of a mile. In August 1919, the mill had a new record payroll of $541,945. The Vandergrift News commented, "This amount of money paid out in a community this size should make it the most prosperous in the United States." There were not enough workers for the mill in the small towns and farms around them. The labor shortage was solved with immigrants from Central and Southern Europe. A rumor in the small towns of Italy was that there was gold in the streets in the new industrial towns of America. This inspired many men to take the 3,000-mile journey by ship to America.
The downtown where was the planned part where Olmsted had designed the city, or the town, that it was supposed to be the model town, blah, blah, blah. And all the streets had curved corners and, you know, it was supposed to be genteel, I guess. Maybe that's the word. That's the downtown Vandergrift, where the wealthier people lived. And the middle town, like there was a ball field here and Linden Street, and all the side streets coming off of Linden, that was known as Park Plan. And all the ethnic groups lived there. Mostly Italians lived there, though. Then the Heights, where all the streets are named after poets, the people actually who worked in the mill.
As the mill grew, so did the town. Other businesses to support the mill were established.
The peak population was 11,479 in 1930.
Vandergrift was not initially impacted by the Great Depression during the early 1930s. Vandergrift was swimming in prosperity and showed little to no signs of financial ruin.
The shift turns, which was 4 to 12, 12 to 8, and 8 to 4, when it was like the half hour before there, you'd see like a parade of men walking down the street with their metal lunch buckets going to work.
By 1933, work at the mill had slowed, and hard times arrived at the town. The start of World War II increased production at the mill. In 1951, the plant was taken over by U.S. Steel Company and became a specialty mill.
Well, in 1959, when I graduated high school, I don't know any of the boys, probably a couple, but that went to college. But most of the girls did because they became school teachers or nurses and jobs like that. But the majority of the guys instantly graduated school. They went to work at either the foundry or the steel mill in town, because that was what everybody wanted to do: graduate, get a job, and buy a new car. That was life back then.
Modernization at the plant required substantially fewer workers. By 1964, mill employment had dropped from 3,000 to 1,000. This was a blow to the town and started the economic downturn that Vandergrift never recovered from.
A 1972 article in the Vandergrift newspaper, celebrating the town's 75th anniversary, stated that the Vandergrift plant begins the next 75 years equipped to compete favorably with both domestic and foreign companies.
Residents hoped that improvements to the plant would bring steelwork in the town back to the level of its glory days. Unfortunately, this was not the case. As the mid-1970s approached, the steel industry was in its worst decline ever and could not compete with the onslaught of cheaper foreign steel products. In 1986, there was a 6-month lockout at the plant, and in 1988, the plant ceased operations. It reopened 2 years later, but with only a few hundred highly skilled employees who commuted from other parts of the area. The citizens of Vandergrift felt betrayed. Since no other businesses outside of supporting this industry were ever established, the closing of the mill had a devastating effect on the town.
Most of the businesses supporting the residents, such as clothing stores, restaurants, hair salons, and car dealerships, eventually failed as well.
Grant Avenue, once a successful commercial street lined with shops and restaurants, now contains mostly vacant storefronts.
It was very different then. People, the mills were booming, the foundry was booming, and there was a lot of people in town, 3 times as many as there are now. There was a Allegheny Steel Mill still here, but it's all so automated. They have less than 100 people in a big plant. And yeah, it's pretty much retired people that live off of their retirement, and they support the restaurants and the few businesses that are in town. It's very low-key compared to what it used to be years ago when the streets were packed and there were hundreds of different stores. Now there's just a few.
Vandergrift was a successful town for its first 75 years because the steel industry was growing and the Vandergrift mill was an important part of the industry. But even McMurtry's experiment with providing benefits to his employees, such as worker-owned homes, could not overcome the issues with the town focused on one industry.
Workers were led to believe that if they worked for the mill would provide for them and their families for many generations. However, as the number of people employed at the Vandergrift plant decreased, those who lost their jobs had to look outside of Vandergrift for work, and most moved away.
The town supporting businesses that flourished while the mill was booming closed as the population declined. The town was not able to recover from the collapse of the steel industry. Vandergrift ultimately met the same tragic fate as most of the company towns along the nation's Rust Belt.